You're listening to The Pump Fake.
And welcome into the latest edition of the Pump Fake. Everybody, Jarrett Bailey here with you as always as we roll through training camp around the NFL and continue discussing all 32 teams. And joining me today, my colleague from SB Nation at Blogging the Boys, RJ Ochoa. Good to see you making your Pump Fake debut. How are you doing, my friend?
It's great to be with you. I appreciate you having me on. I was admiring your setup right before we started recording, and I always like this the time of year where you get like those football butterflies, and I think back to like the high school version of myself who had nobody to like talk about stuff like this with, like on the same level, and I just had this obsession with the NFL, and it's always great to kind of park your cars in the same garage as people who feel that way. And so I'm happy. My cup is full. Like it's football season. There's a football game this week. I know we'll lose interest like 30 seconds in, but
well, speak for yourself, my friend. There's going to be some people who are betting heavily on Trey Lance lines this week.
You know what? I've walked that walk before with Trey Lance. I'm obviously here to talk about the Cowboys, so I have no interest in reliving that. But it's a great time of year, and I'm looking forward to the next 6 months or so.
Yeah, as is plenty of people who are listening to this, and people like you and I wore my some sort of. It looks like I'm wearing like the light of Nazareth right now because of my like lighting, but this is a blue shirt. I wore it for the occasion to talk about.
That's a
Dallas
blue
Cowboys.
shirt.
It is blue. It's like a baby blue shirt. Like
Okay,
it's very light blue.
This is like that dress, like the gold blue thing. Like that's what you have going on here. Yeah.
Yes. No, very good shout. But yeah, I promise this is blue. That ring light is ring lighting right now, so it is certainly it is adding a little bit of some whiteness to this. But yeah, the Dallas Cowboys, as they always are, I mean, they're going to get talked about as much, probably more than just about any team around the NFL, but some, noteworthy acquisitions they've made this offseason, most notably George Pickens being acquired from my Steelers, which, obviously dominated headlines and whatnot. So let's talk about the offense, because last year, for the second time in 4 seasons, the worth of and value of Dak Prescott was shown by his absence. And, about a month into the season was pretty much done for Dallas because he was gone. Now adding George Pickens to complement CeeDee Lamb, bringing over Javonte Williams in the run game, drafting Jaden Blue there as well. Offensively, this should be a unit that is consistently good and puts up a lot of points.
Yeah, look, I don't mean to filibuster or take us on too far of a tangent, but I
filibuster as much as you want.
To understand the 2025 Cowboys, you really have to understand the 2024 Cowboys, because there's not a lot of people like you, unfortunately, who are willing to kind of objectively look at the Cowboys, and it just kind of gets diluted to just the meme of who they are. And that's not the Cowboys are better than you thing. That's just, we all understand that they get talked about in a different way. And this is a front office that quite literally did not try last year. I mean, like that isn't like an exaggeration.
What do you mean, RJ? They were all in, and they brought in Michael Kendricks. Did they not?
Eric Kendricks.
Eric Kendricks. I'm sorry. Yeah.
But that he and Zeke Elliott were their 2 offseason moves. That was it. Like that, again, that's like if you look up the transactional history, that's what it was. And so they stirred this pot of toxicity on top of the fact that they sent Mike McCarthy into a contract year and all the drama that came with that. And so they were broken. I mean, you've talked about Dak getting injured. That happened in Atlanta. That took a little bit, but they got blown out by New Orleans. They got blown out by Baltimore, and Derrick Henry predictably ran all over them. They just had no answer. They're like, one shining moment incidentally happened at Pittsburgh in that game that took like 3 hours to start. And so they were a team that was sabotaged by their front office. And so I think that we are so far removed from 2023, and I'm not here to tell you like, oh, just because they were great then, whatever. But Dak finished second in MVP voting that year. CeeDee set every single Dallas Cowboys franchise record for receiving. Like they were a top tier offense, something that I don't think Mike McCarthy ever got credit for, to be honest, but that's obviously changed. So I think that they have been adults. They've been competent adults at that as far as putting together this offense. I don't know that I feel that way about the running back position, obviously. But acquiring George Pickens was something that really elevated who Dak Prescott can and will be. He's got one of the better deep balls in the NFL, which is something, again, when you say, you get met with the like Dak, like whatever. It's like, yeah, I'm serious if you want to have a real conversation. So it does seem like they're at least, moving towards a North Star, which they weren't doing at this time last year.
Yeah, and I think bringing in a compliment like Pickens, who is a very good deep ball receiver, to CeeDee Lamb, who's a great everything receiver, will certainly help the offense. Obviously, Brian Schottenheimer being the new head man has garnered a lot of attention, rightfully so. Never been a head coach before, has bounced around the NFL for the better part of 2.5 decades, but a respected name now getting his shot. What are your thoughts on Schottenheimer being the guy to replace Mike McCarthy? And what was you pointed out, a very odd situation.
Yeah, and I don't mean to just keep taking steps backwards here, but it's worth reiterating that the Cowboys dragged the McCarthy dismissal out a week. Yeah. They obviously didn't make the playoffs, and because they did that, they spent the entire week of the wild card round, just dancing and doing nothing, and we're figuring this out. And because they did that, they costed themselves the ability to interview, even in a virtual sense only, the Detroit Lions offensive coordinators and Kansas City Chiefs offensive coordinators. And so when they finally decided to move on from McCarthy, they quite literally could not even talk to Ben Johnson or Aaron Glenn, who were obviously notable candidates in the pool. And so even then, that first week, what was then the divisional round, they spent it interviewing Kellen Moore and Robert Saleh and Leslie Frazier. Brian Schottenheimer's name first entered the lexicon because he was the betting favorite in sports books. Like that, he hadn't even interviewed before that happened. And then obviously all the dominoes began to fall. It was the Friday night before conference championship weekend when this news came out. And I don't know if you recall this, but it came out in the dead of night. It was like 9 p.m. on a Friday night. It was almost like shameful. It was almost like, for a team that loves the spotlight, it was almost like we really hope nobody even notices this.
Right.
It was a really dark moment. And I think that kind of rippled into his opening press conference, not because of anything he had to do with, but you may recall Stephen Jones's quote that went viral where he said this drought that people say we're in. And he used air quotes talking about the Cowboys. And it was like, what are you talking about? This is a drought. Like, I don't know, what you think that word means. But ever since then, ever since that moment, Schottenheimer has, I think, won everything that he can. You can't win anything in a real sense, obviously, right, to this point, but he has said all the right things. He has proven that he has the right leadership qualities and the right kind of energy and the right kind of disposition. And so he's really won people over. I think people are willing to give him the benefit of, you had your chances before, you didn't pounce on them, and then the NFL world kind of passed you by and you've been playing catch up ever since. It's very unorthodox how he arrived here. He was the Cowboys OC for 2 years without even calling plays. He hasn't called plays, to your point, in a very long time, and he hasn't called plays successfully in an even longer time. So
right.
It is a weird way to have arrived here, but in a weird sense on top of that, everybody is kind of excited about it.
Yeah, and I'll give a hat tip to my friend Greg Rosenthal, who pointed out that his father was a better head coach than he was a coordinator, and perhaps his Brian will take after his dad and maybe go a similar path and have similar success. Maybe. On the defensive side of the ball, there are question marks for me. Obviously, Tank Lawrence no longer there. They bring back Dante Fowler after he had a year in Washington. But looking at the injuries right now, they drafted Siobhan Revel, who had an injury last year. Trevon Diggs, injury history well known. DeMarvion Overshown dealing with an injury. Like, there's a lot of question marks there that make me a little bit apprehensive of buying into that unit.
Yeah, I'm with you. DeMarvion Overshown, they have spoken like Thanksgiving, Christmas could be, point of return, but that's one of those things that you kind of can't count on. And
right.
if it happens, great. Obviously everybody's rooting for him, but he does seem to have the favor of the front office in a way that some players have. They let him switch to number 0 this offseason, which was a high point of contention, as stupid as it sounds, because Rowdy, the mascot, wore it. And so
they're really focusing on the key issues in Dallas.
Yeah, obviously. But so Overshown is kind of icing on the cake for 2025, at least. With regards to Trevon Diggs, it's difficult to know what you're going to get out of him. Obviously, he's on the PUP list at the moment that you and I are talking here. and has had kind of an up and down career ever since getting his extension, which Jerry Jones, kind of regretted openly at the beginning of training camp, which was a choice to say the least.
Right.
I think, and Savon Ravel was, obviously a lot of people believe would have been a first round talent if not for the injury at East Carolina last year. So that's a lot of like boomer bust potential in the cornerback position specifically. And that's where, the Cowboys made a handful of veteran trades outside of even the George Pickens one. And one of them was the acquisition of Kaiir Elam from the Buffalo Bills. And he has really, we're a week into camp and all the necessary context and whatnot, but he has really started to kind of flash and pop and
had a nice interception on, who was he in coverage against? My mind is
Jalen Tolbert.
There we go.
And then went and lifted the kid out of the stands. It was a great moment. And
nice moment. Yeah.
If he can be the guy he was coming out of Gainesville, or at least the Buffalo thought he was coming out of Gainesville, and Trayvon can be serviceable and Deron Bland can kind of refine his form and you can get something out of Savon Ravel, like, the floor rises for the cornerback room. But to your point, it just takes one wrong swing of the pendulum for you to get the negative side of things and the negative effects. But other than that, there are no like devastating injuries that they're dealing with. And obviously they're dealing with the Micah situation, which is a unique thing in and of itself.
Yeah, I mean, we might as well talk about Micah Parsons. Stephen Jones, during practice, some fan yelled out, "Pay Micah," and Stephen Jones says, "Well, something along the line. I'm paraphrasing here. Well, Micah's got to want to be paid." Which, you know what? Fantastic. Well done. Way to find a way to be like, actually, we can say, well, maybe he doesn't want to be paid. That. It's a masterful job by Stephen Jones of kind of turning the tide. I think it's absolutely hilarious from an outsider's point of view. I'm sure for you and Cowboys fans, this is just like another head in the palmo, or just like, oh my God, when does this end with the Jones family? I like many other people believe this is going to get done. It always does with Dallas. We saw this exact same thing last year with CD, and it got taken care of right around this time, actually, right? They were a little bit into camp, and they announced the extensions for both CD and Dak. So I fully expect it to get done, but these things apparently never get done without a bunch of unnecessarily bad PR from Dallas before they finally just cave.
Yeah, so for anyone unaware, the Cowboys hold training camp in Oxnard, California, about the first 3/4 of camp, and then they break and they return to Frisco and finish it off at the Star, their world headquarters. And it was through the Oxnard portion that CD held out, so he didn't even go to Oxnard last year. And Dak got done. He participated, which gets no credit for, whatever you want to say, despite being in the situation he was. His deal got done, if you recall, quite literally the day the season began. It was like 10. Yeah. It was like 10 a.m. week 1 Sunday.
I totally forgot about that. Yes.
It literally came out like right before the noon game inactives. Like, it was that touch and go. And so it is needlessly complicated. You mentioned PR. That's what's maybe been if you are an outsider, if you are just like a fan of theater, what's been the most interesting is Micah has played the PR game magnificently relative to Dak or CD. CD held out, and that comes with negative PR because people are mouth breathers and dumb, and he should show up, he should honor his contract, whatever. And Dak is the quarterback of the Cowboys, so that carries just a bullseye that anyone who holds the position does. But Micah has showed up. He has held in, whatever you want to call it. He has said the right things. He said way before any of this that he did not need to be the highest paid defensive player. But so all that is kind of, been coal in the engine that has, led to people getting on his side. And then Steven says what he does. They just, and I think that Micah also has, from a PR angle, leveraged I don't know that people caught on to the Cowboys' antics prior to the Dak and CD deals a year ago. I think that elevated this conversation on a national scale, and that works in Micah's benefit relative to this moment in time. So there's not a soul alive who's like, yeah, trade Micah, get rid of him. Like he's being outlandish because people have been talking about this. He was first eligible for an extension last year. Right. I mean, and that's where people say, like, he needs to show up. He needs to do this. It's like, well, dude, he showed up all of last year and he got hurt and he played through it. And you could have got this done not only before TJ Watt, you could have got it done before Myles Garrett at the beginning of this offseason. And so I think that we've reached a point where you can no longer logically conclude anything other than that this is for attention. And I think people just recognize how sad and small that is for the Cowboys. And so it just kind of is what it is.
Yeah, and it doesn't help when Jerry Jones is calling him Michael Parson during his press conferences and whatnot, and it's just a bunch of stuff that happens every year. Where, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think that if I was a Cowboys fan, I wouldn't put too much into it because it happens this often with all these star players. And I think, is that where you are at this point, which is like, yeah, like this is what it is.
Yeah, and that's why I felt it necessary to bring up last year. I think that,
Sure.
and it is also important to begin or to show how last year began, which was right after the playoff loss to Green Bay, and that loss. I mean, I don't have to tell you about a playoff loss at AT&T Stadium to the Packers. You obviously know that very well.
Yeah.
You know, as far as the team you root for. So that loss really, yeah, sorry, that loss really broke this team. Like I mean, if I was a Packers fan, I would hold such satisfaction in the way that it just decimated the Cowboys. I mean,
especially with that rivalry that's always been there. That's just another feather in their cap.
They were truly, bumbling fools for all of last year on the heels of that playoff loss. And that it happened with Mike McCarthy running things. Like, again, it just added to the hilarity, and it was just soaking wet in hilariousness if you're a Packers fan or if you hate the Cowboys. So they were truly wandering and then did nothing but watch themselves get stripped away and sent everyone in. And then during the season, there were all sorts of things. The sun was an issue the way it always is. Jerry, fighting with hosts on the flagship station of the Cowboys.
You're saying all of these things, and it's like coming back where I forgot about the like sun thing for like that owned Dallas media for like 3 weeks, where Jerry's like, the damn sun is there, and we will whatever the hell. God damn, that's so funny.
They played a Monday night game against Houston, and a piece of metal fell from the sky when they tried to open the roof. I don't know if you remember that. That was a Monday night game, and then they had to close it. It was, so again, it just really felt like this like cursed year. And so I say all that to say, like, I think that fans do, like, people, you have the fans that like are blind and this is the year no matter what. Like, those people do exist, but they're not as popular as Cowboys fans get stereotyped to be.
It's a vocal minority.
Right. I do think that most people have developed, especially because this year will mark 30 years since the Cowboys beat the Steelers, and that was their last taste of success in Super Bowl 30. I think people have developed this callous and recognize that this is a part of their lives. The next 6 months are going to be great. I'm going to tailgate. I'm going to do my things. I'm going to have my fantasy leagues and all this stuff. But I think they've placed a legitimate ceiling on expectations, because how could you not at this point in time? And I recognize Steelers fans are maybe kind of getting there, but there is an apathy that has grown. I work the Super Bowl, and I'm very grateful for my job. I'm also grateful that I can be a Cowboys fan in my job. And I think I speak for a lot of people in saying, like, the Eagles blew apart this like NFL dynasty, and I was in no way bothered. If anything, I was just like, good for you. Like, that's really impressive, because you do it the right way. You work really hard, and you were rewarded for this. Like, that's the way it should work. And I think that people who are Cowboys fans have watched specifically over the last 18 months the way this ownership group and this front office operates, and then in parallel watch the Eagles, who are just looking under every single rock for any kind of advantage, that I think people have just kind of given up. They're again, you may have the real people who don't watch or whatever, but like, people understand this is more entertainment for them than it is actual competition. Maybe they're fans of another team that they get that competitive scratch taken care of from. And maybe the Cowboys will one day stumble into a Super Bowl because it's a league of parity. But I think people recognize this is not a team that is doing everything they can to win, which is pretty obvious at this point.
And I think those lack of parallels with the Cowboys and Eagles, like just the complete other side of the coin with Philadelphia, where you look at how they team build in terms of, all right, it's very clear they want to be great in the trenches. If they find great players, or if they acquire great players, they're going to make sure that they pay them and do it ahead of time, where they did it with AJ Brown and Devonta Smith and Jalen Hurts, and they just rewarded Saquon. So like, they get ahead of these things. And compare that to what Dallas does, it doesn't really feel like there's much of a proof of concept when it comes to how they draft and how they add players. And obviously, we just spent 15 minutes talking about what happens when money is due to those great players. It's just such a complete inverse of how those two franchises operate within the same division. And you said, it didn't, you were more or less just like, all right, good for them. But is there a sense of just like, why can't the Cowboys be like that in your mind?
I think it's the average NFL fan is so smart, right? Or smarter than they used to be. And so
Very much so.
You can look at a team like the Eagles and you can, I'm not, presenting the idea that being an NFL GM is easier, that what Howie Roseman does is easy, but it's easy to kind of catch on to these things and easy to compare to your team and say like, well, my team's not doing this. And look at Micah, like, why are they behind the Eagles? Whatever. Like, I mean, Micah's a 2021 draft pick. You mentioned Greg Rosenthal. He was the first person who kind of made it click for me. We have 2022. Garrett Wilson was paid. Sauce Gardner was paid. Like you have first rounders from the year after who are getting paid and Micah still hasn't. And so you have these people who can see this, and the Eagles really highlight that just because they are direct rivals for the Cowboys. And I think people used to be frustrated and used to really scream like, why can't you be like that? Now the Cowboys have just beaten it all into us that like, we're not going to be this way. Like we own the team and this is how we want to do things. And so it has, if there's a team that kind of, annoys you in that sense, if you're a Cowboys fan, I think it's probably Washington, just because it's Dan Quinn and he was beloved by so many Cowboys fans, and they signed like 19 former Cowboys.
There's so many former Cowboys that followed him. Yes.
And that they, made the NFC Championship game right away. And that it was just fortuitous that Detroit had made it the year before, and they were the only two teams who had a longer title game drought than Dallas. So like that Washington was the team to put Dallas at the bottom of that ladder just stings a little bit, and that Washington's kind of cool again, right? Like people like them, and like it was always something you could kind of count on, that they were going to be this runt of the litter, and now it's just the Giants. And if the Giants were to find relevance again before the Cowboys, it would just add to the hilarity. But I think that people are just like I love Succession. I love Game of Thrones, right? Like I love all this. The Cowboys are not that. Those are the Eagles. Like the Cowboys, though, they're Real Housewives, and they're not going to win an Emmy. But you're going to watch, right? Like they are Love Island. Like they are going to be the show that everyone talks about, but they're not going to win any kind of Screen Actors Guild Awards or have any actors that go on to star on other properties, but they are going to get views in a way that even Succession will be jealous of.
The Dallas Cowboys are Love Island. That is that's so good. Oh, I love that. Somebody you should write it. You should do it right after we're done here. That's good.
I mean, I love the Cowboys, to be very clear. Like,
sure.
I hate that I, have to be so critical of them. But I'll be the first one to tell you that they don't do things the right way. And that doesn't even, like, it's not even just the Eagles, right? The Eagles are clearly the opposite end of the spectrum, but it's the teams in the middle of the spectrum. And what frustrates me is it dilutes the ability to evaluate them objectively, like I said. And I felt that way. I think Mike McCarthy was the person who helped me really fully see that, because do I think Mike McCarthy is the greatest coach of all time? No. Do I think he has absolute flaws? Clearly, obviously. But the man gets treated like he has done nothing in the NFL. We have learned, and I don't mean to pick on the Steelers, but we have learned how difficult of a person Aaron Rodgers is, like clearly over the last 5 years. And we still look at the entirety of McCarthy's time with him and are like, that was all Aaron. Mike was just along for the ride. And he gets zero credit for that. And look, the Cowboys have not been a great team for 30 years, basically. They've been a good team, but they haven't had playoff success. Sure. And Mike McCarthy is, without a doubt, the best coach in the draft. It's better than Bill Parcells. They had never even been to the playoffs in consecutive seasons before Mike McCarthy got there. He took them to the playoffs 3 years in a row, and he did it under the guidance of the Love Island, casting directors, right? Like, and I wish that people would look at that and be like, look, it is much more difficult to succeed there because the team is stupid. But so we can grade Mike McCarthy on a curve. We can grade Dak Prescott on a curve. We can grade CeeDee Lamb on a curve and be like, the fact that you're accomplishing what you are in spite of what's around you is impressive.
And I'll say this too. I mean, not to keep it about the Steelers, but like Mike Tomlin and Mike McCarthy have the same playoff record. Both of them have a Super Bowl.
Sean Payton too. I mean,
Sean Payton too.
Yeah.
Totally. So I think that Mike McCarthy gets a lot of unnecessary hate. And I think, I don't know. I don't necessarily have my pulse on the what Cowboys fans thought of them letting McCarthy go, but it's clear that you didn't like the move. Do you think that he'll be more appreciated after him being gone than he was when he was there?
I do. And again, I don't mean to be like a woe is the Cowboys thing, but like, look at Dan Quinn. Like the Cowboys defense over the final stretch of 2023, which was his final season, they got worked by Buffalo. They got worked by Miami. They obviously got worked by Green Bay in that playoff game. I talked about that. That was a playoff game that broke a franchise, and somehow Dan Quinn emerged unscathed, right? Like nobody talks about Dan Quinn with that. Nobody talks about even, I said this a lot last year, and this is a little Cowboys bias. that I think great things about the Detroit Lions. I have a lot of respect for the way they've gone about these things. If Mike McCarthy blew a 17-point lead in the NFC Championship game, partly because he had his foot on the gas, people would be calling him Fred Flintstone and all these different things. But because Dan Campbell's like, and I love Dan Campbell, he's cool and he's a jock and all these different things. It's like, did anybody say that once last offseason that the Lions blew that 17-point lead? No. And if they had, it would have been like, well, the 49ers were a really good team. Yeah, the 49ers who kicked the Cowboys' ass twice in the playoffs, right? And similarly, we laud Dan Quinn for reaching the NFC Championship game. They got blown out. They got their doors blown off again by a very good team. But we don't apply demerits in the same way, to other people in my estimation. And some of that is the Cowboys tax, and I live with that. I'm not, sad about it or anything, but I do think I'm the minority. Most people were happy to see McCarthy go, and you can make an argument that a change was necessary. I'm not, above that, but we also sit here and we look, and I think you've probably said, oh yeah, Dak in 23 was amazing. CeeDee in 23 was amazing. There was no Kellen Moore. That was Mike McCarthy calling offensive plays. Yep. And we're here and like, oh, Kellen's going to change the Saints and Dak's going to have this awesome year and CeeDee's going to have this awesome year. Like, you can't tell me that the head coach sucks and the quarterback sucks and the star wide receiver sucks and the front office sucks, and yet they're still really successful in the regular season, admittedly. So like, something had to be really good about what was going on for them to have the success that they did.
All right. Well, let's talk about ceilings and floors for this team in 2025. What do you think the ceiling could be for the 2025 Dallas Cowboys?
I do love an Aaron Rodgers-ism about whatever it was. Like, there's like 8 to 12 teams who can win the Super Bowl realistically every year. I would put the Cowboys on that list. Like, it's not a ranking, but if you're saying there's a bucket of these teams that can do it, I think the Cowboys can, because they have a franchise quarterback, a franchise wide receiver, a franchise pass rusher. You got those things, you can stumble your way into it. So I think that's their true total ceiling. I think if you simulated the season 1,000 times, I think they're probably a playoff team, like 60% of it. As you know, the NFC East has not had a repeat winner in 20 years. So that doesn't mean anything, but it also doesn't mean nothing. At the same time. Now people would probably say that Washington's the pick to do it if it's not Dallas, but I think
with Washington, not to say they're going to be bad, they're not going to win 12 games again, nor are they going to have just the absolute rabbit's foot in their ass like they did last year, where they just pulled out a bunch of last second wins.
Yeah, totally. Like, I mean, you flap the butterfly's wings once in like the Chicago Hail Mary game, like, and all of a sudden, like, our outlook on them is very different. I'm completely with you. So again, the Cowboys did win 12 with this nucleus of players, 12 games in a row. We're a playoff team 3 years in a row, right before their front office completely, willfully, consciously sabotaged them. So depending on where you look, for a long time, their win total over under was 7.5, which I think is absurd. And that's not a Cowboys homer thing. That is since Tony Romo took over as the full-time starter midway through the 2006 season, they have been a fringe playoff team every year except for the ones where the franchise quarterback or Romo himself. And even then, Dak got hurt last year and they finished 7-10. So you're telling me 7.5, like, that is super easy. I would even take 8.5, 9.5. I'd say they're probably somewhere around 9 to 11 wins, just depending on the way the ball bounces. So I guess that answers your floor question. I don't think they will bottom out. I always tell people you will never do your Christmas shopping with them mathematically eliminated from playoff contention. In fact, I used to say when I was first starting all this, that, and it is accurate, that Tony Romo never played a game where he was mathematically eliminated from playoff contention.
That's pretty crazy.
Some of it was that he got hurt at the right time, like before but I mean, it was still true. But that being said, like, they will be in the mix. And if they're in the mix and they can get in the playoffs, then obviously in a literal sense, they have the chance to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, so I do an exercise twice a year, once when the schedule releases and then once the week before the season starts, where I predict every game. And in the first prediction, I had them going 7-10 because of the Brian Schottenheimer thing. I was just like, I don't know if I believe in him as a head coach. As the offseason's gone on, though, and I think with those points that you just made, I allow myself to be educated and adjust when new information is presented to me. I do think that number will certainly be higher. And I am a Dak appreciator. I think that he is as close to unquestionably a top 10 guy as you can get. And again, we've talked about it already, where his value is seen even more when he's not on the field than when he is. And each time that he's gone down, which some people will point out, well, if any quarterback went down, you had to go to a backup, most teams would bottom out. But, there are teams like the 49ers who seem to find their way with whoever the hell's under center. There are teams or the Eagles or like the Vikings can, stumble into 7-8 wins because they have, the head coach that's there to be able to make things work. With Dallas, it's been a lot of, each time that Dak's been gone for the year, we've seen how that's gone. So I do believe he's a top 10 guy and, got an easy guy to root for. And I would like to see him have some success. And you have to think that at some point, this lack of conference championship drought will end. And if I had to pick either Dallas or Washington to win the NFC East, if it's not going to be Philadelphia, a few months ago, I might've said Washington, but the Commanders defense, there's a lot of lapses there that I'm not super excited about. Like they just signed Von Miller, who's probably going to be their best pass rusher. Maybe Dorrance Armstrong. I don't know.
Former Cowboy.
Those things. Yeah. Former Cowboy, another former Cowboy that followed Dan Quinn. So there's some real questions that I have about them, and fair or not, like I'm going to say, all right, Cliff, go do that again. I don't know. I don't know if I just believe in Cliff Kingsbury too much. So I would probably lean Dallas at this point just because I believe in Dak and I believe in CeeDee Lamb, and I just believe in mostly Dak more than I believe in a Washington team who just hasn't done it consistently yet.
I think all that's really rational and fair. I think like if you were to rank the things you have the most trust in the entire NFL, like the Dak and CD connections, like a top 10 thing, you know what I mean? Sure. Like if you can rank anything, like if you can get as vague as you want with it. And so that can power them. And you add George Pickens, obviously, to that mix. And by all accounts, everything right now is kumbaya and copacetic. And there's none of the, stuff that was going. And to be, honest, I was against the trade because I did not trust them to be able to handle it. And so it felt very, reachy.
It felt very Dallas in terms of just like, okay, big star player wants out, we can fix. It feels very Terrell Owens. That's what we saw with that.
They don't do that as often as they get stereotyped for saying they do, but the TO one is a great example of it. And even then, like the first 3 years of TO were incredible. But he has completely taken to CD, completely taken to Dak. So like you do kind of feel that, in the air, again, famous last words type thing. But I would offer that CD and George Pickens today are the best 1-2 pass catching duo, like if you include tight ends, whatever, that Dak has ever had. Because even, he had Amari and CD in the same offense for 2 years. But CD was still, like Charmeleon, like he hadn't become Charizard yet. You know what I mean? And so
Pokemon references on the show is where you lose me, but I think I understand that one at least a little bit.
He was still just young CeeDee Lamb. He had not become this alpha yet. And so you've got, I don't know where you or anybody would rank CeeDee, but I think you say top 5. I don't think anybody scoffs at that.
No, I think that the top 3 guys unquestionably right now are Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, exactly. And in whatever order strikes your fancy on a given day, I think though that CeeDee's probably 3rd for most people more often than not.
I would agree.
Still though, like, okay, so you got the 3rd best receiver in the NFL and the 20th, 25th, maybe, like if you're, really kind of being conservative here. Dak has never had that. Like I would say the last, level of potency he had in this manner was probably peak Dez and Jason Witten. That was it. And that was early before Dak really fully evolved as a passer in 2019. That was when we saw him kind of take a step. And he's been kind of the engine of the offense ever since then.
And even when he had Dez and Jason Witten, it wasn't like it was back end of his career, Dez Bryant, back end of his career, Jason Witten. So like, even so, like this duo, I would agree, is by far the best that he's had in terms of pass catchers.
And so it's an offensive league. And if you can be stable on offense, I mean, they were haphazard last year when he got hurt, and again, still won 7 games because they had Micah Parsons, because they had, at the time, DeMarcus Lawrence. There's a lot of turnover there. And the Matt Eberflus part of it all, I know we haven't discussed that. That's a question. He had a lot of success as the Cowboys linebackers coach, was instrumental in Sean Lee's growth and development. And so it's exciting to, he was kind of the de facto defensive coordinator before he left. The Cowboys just kept Rod Marinelli in place with the title. It was silly. But that I have a lot of faith in that. I know, again, that's one of those, like, everyone's only going to, whenever you talk about him or mention his name, talk about the timeout and Thanksgiving last year and whatever. But
head coach wise, he's not a head coach. Defensive coordinator, he has proven success with Indianapolis and in other defensive positions he's had around the league.
Exactly. So everything is there. And I don't ever put stock into like, well, no one's talking about the Cowboys this year, blah, blah. Like, again, they're going to get their narratives, however they're going to happen. That's just who they are at this point. But they're not a team that's going to fall flat. Now, like it does all ultimately, and this is obvious, but fall on Brian Schottenheimer because he's also the offensive play caller. Like on top of it, and Mike McCarthy was the first head coach offensive play caller that the Cowboys had in over a decade. Because Jason Garrett had given the duties up when he was the man in charge. So that's a lot to put on his plate. I mean, we have no idea what that's going to look like, and we still don't know who the starting running back is, right? Like it's really easy to come back down to earth, I think, but the points of leadership, the most important cornerstones of the team, I think, are players who we agree are top level in the NFL.
In terms of what the season will be for Dallas, what the result will be, do you expect them to be a playoff team, and how far do you expect them to go? I guess in the NFC hierarchy, where would you put them going into this season?
I think the Eagles hold a place on their own, right? If we're talking hierarchy, and then I think Detroit probably has its own tier as well. And then I think we've maybe forgotten that San Francisco was kind of Philadelphia before Philadelphia was. And so I their drama's behind them. Maybe McCaffrey plays the whole year or most of it, whatever. But I think they're in that mix. I mean, I'd put them ahead of Green Bay. I'd put them. I love Kevin O'Connell, to your point, but like we don't know about JJ McCarthy.
Don't tell it to Vikings fans though, or on Twitter though, because then they'll come at you.
Right. So they're a question mark. I remain surprised and impressed that Tampa's been able to kind of keep this going, even well after Brady's gone. But I think they're well in that mix. I think they're on the same tier as Washington. I know people would roll their eyes at that. I think they'll be a playoff team, and I hate to boil it down to this, but I think that some of it is dependent on what they draw, and that's why we were so excited as a fan base 2 years ago, because it felt like this is how pathetic we are. It was a matter of like, okay, awesome. We got Green Bay. They're the 7th seed. They're these little kids. They have no idea what this moment is. At the very least, we're going to make it to the title game, and San Francisco will blow our doors off. But we'll get rid of the drought. Like we'll get rid of the haven't been to the title game thing, whatever. And that was part of why the loss was so devastating. But to that point, in the last 4 years, the Cowboys have lost to 2 different teams in the playoffs. They lost to the Jimmy Garoppolo Niners, the Brock Purdy Niners, and then obviously to the Packers. And we agree, I think, that the Niners are a would-be dynasty if not for the existence of the Chiefs. if not for them, like we would sit here and really be like, this team is amazing. And the Cowboys lose to them, and it's like, y'all suck. Like y'all are embarrassing, whatever. Yet the Lions lose to this Commanders team, who you and I both have questions about, and we're still not here saying a word about Dan Campbell. And then the Cowboys lose to this Packers team that we acknowledge have this quarterback who's like on his way. They're rising in this nucleus, whatever. So I think this is a bit homery. I think they've had some bad luck. They've had their 3 worst days on like the worst 3 possible days that you can have over the last like 1,200 days. You know what I mean? And so do they draw? Do they get a Vikings team led by Sam Darnold type thing in the playoffs? Right? Like are they that team? The year that Dallas was close a couple of years back, the Eagles earned the first round bye. I think you should get credit for that. But then drew the Daniel Jones Giants in the divisional round.
Right.
In this whole drought era, the Cowboys have never had that kind of tomato can standing between them and the NFC Championship game. And so, if they had and if they lost that, I mean, the Cowboys in the divisional round in the 30 years that we're talking here, I don't mean to be long-winded, but they've lost to Brett Favre's Vikings. They've lost, granted, to Eli's Giants, but the ones who slayed the 18-0 Patriots.
The ones who got hot twice at the perfect time, and he just became unstoppable. Yes.
They lost to Aaron Rodgers. I mean, Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay on the desk catch game, and the miraculous 3rd and 20 game with a rookie quarterback even. I know we think highly of Dak. They lost to Sean McVay's Rams, right? Like they lost to Kyle Shanahan, who we hold high in high esteem, and Matt LaFleur to a lesser degree. So like, they have just run into like dudes on different levels, you know what I mean, in this whole drought era. So if they can catch, a weird Falcons team that makes the divisional round, like maybe that is finally fate smiling upon them and saying, you've crawled through enough, Andy Dufresne. Here's the rain at the end of your tunnel type thing.
I love it. Before we wrap this up, let's do predictive standings in the NFC East 1 through 4. What's that look like?
I'm not going to be bullish enough to say that I declare them as winners, but I'll say Philly repeats. I mean, like it has to happen at a certain point. And
sure,
like
fair enough.
If you've got to bet on one team to do it, I think the Eagles are a good one. So I'll say Philly, Dallas, Washington, New York.
I think that's probably the best consensus one. I think a lot of people are going to put Washington at 2. And I even might myself in terms of like some sort of tiebreaker where they both win 10 games and depending on divisional record and what, things like that, what have you. But I do think that my opinion has changed on them from May till now, especially with the things that you just pointed out in terms of how competitive they remained last year and just throughout the last 20 years and not quite bottoming out in that process. So all fair points to kind of make me give them at least a couple additional wins.
Yeah, look, I hate the man in the ways that we all do, but I also think we lump all the Eagles' success to Howie in the roster. I mean, Nick Sirianni is pretty excellent. I mean, I don't know, like they're all so difficult to evaluate because of the approach that they have as an organization. But I mean, like, I don't know, like who is the best coach in the NFC and why is it not Nick Sirianni? I mean, and I could answer that question, you know what I mean? But I also
my answer to that would be just because Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan are both in the NFC.
I suppose that I can certainly tolerate the Sean McVay argument. I think he's worked hard since winning the Super Bowl to justify it even more, weirdly. Right. But I would not, to be clear, take Nick Sirianni over Kyle Shanahan. But like, sure. It is like winning the Super Bowl provides this level of Teflon for you, and he's got that. And the same argument applies to Hurts. And there's the stupid Cam thing going around, whatever. But
enough with all of that. It's been like a solid 3 weeks of people talking about Jalen Hurts versus dude. We got training camps, we got preseason. Respectfully, everybody, shut the fuck up. Enough of that.
So I can't believe I'm like defending Nick Sirianni here, but the same way I said, you can't tell me that, Dallas's quarterback sucks and head coach sucks and everything. Like somebody has to be good for this to be working. And similarly, whatever you think about Jalen Hurts, you can't sit here and be like, he's overrated. He's just a product of the system. And the coordinators keep changing and not give Nick Sirianni like his slice of the pie. Like whether you think it's big or not, like the man has earned a place in the conversation is maybe the best way to put it.
I would agree with that. And I also think when it comes to Philly, like Howie Roseman gets put on a pedestal a little bit too much. Like, not to say that he's not done a great job because he has, but like everybody acts like he's this genius when he's like, okay, we're going to take the really good guy from Georgia and we're going to take the really good guy from Alabama. Like, wow, great job, Howie. Like, no, he took all of the guys from the 2 best schools and wow, what a shock. Those guys all turned out to be pretty good. And I know he gets a lot of credit for it, but Howie's not out there coaching or playing. Like you have to have the right guy in place to do that. And I'm not a Sirianni guy either. He's a bit much for me. And I probably have a similar opinion that most people do, where it's just like, all right, I don't need to hear him talk or anything. He's kind of annoying, but he has gotten the job done. Kudos to him for it. So that's just kind of my opinion on all of it. But I would agree that Dallas would be at the lowest third in the division, but even then, not like a horrible third. I do think that 3 teams will be good in this division, and then the Giants will be the Giants. That will unfortunately have to watch like 6 times in standalone games because we have to do that every year for some reason.
It's sad. You and I are similar in age, and when I like in high school, that was the game that you got pumped for as a Cowboys fan. It was like, at the time the Eagles weren't this like real, they were a rival, but like it wasn't a big deal. But like the Cowboys trip to the Meadowlands was like a lock in. Like this is for real. Like this is serious type stuff. And so that's also why that playoff loss is so devastating.
No, I hear you on that. RJ Ochoa, my friend, this is a lot of fun. Plug everything that you got coming in terms of Cowboys coverage and where everybody can find your stuff.
blogontheboys.com. You can obviously read the work from myself and our talented staff. Blog on the Boys YouTube channel is how you access any kind of discussion I do. I'm all over social, RJ Ochoa, most places, but on TikTok, the joke I make all the time is that some jerk had it, so I had to go with RJ.Ochoa. It does bother me on some level that I couldn't get it. So
is it? I don't know how big of a Family Guy fan you are, but there's an episode where James Woods gets killed on Family Guy, and they're going around the room giving the reasons why, like each person would want to do it. And Mayor Adam West, he's like, he took the Twitter handle Mayor West, so I had to use Mayor _West. That's exactly what that reminded me of.
That's definitely the passion I feel, not to the point of committing a crime, but sure. Yeah, it was. And look, the underscore is stupid. Like if you're gonna do it, like add a number, like you know what I mean. Like don't make someone have to like go to the alternate part of the
right
keyboard. Look, nobody can ever remember where it is. Just throw a 1 at the very end.
I love it. Everybody, for watching this on YouTube, please be sure to subscribe on YouTube. If you're listening as a podcast, leave a review, leave a comment, do all that fun stuff. Be sure to follow everything going on Behind the Steel Curtain as well for all my Steelers coverage, as well as the Sporting News and USA Today Sports Media Group for my national coverage. RJ, this is a lot of fun, man. I can't wait to have you on again to talk more Dallas as the year goes on. Appreciate you for joining me.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Talk to everybody very soon. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is the Pump Fake.